We return now to Westinghouse Studio 1 and 12 Angry Men.
12 Angry Men was part of Studio One, which is a signature drama series on CBS. CBS always identified itself with quality drama. They hired a really well-known producer, Worthington Miner. His task was to create a series that would really be the hallmark of fine drama for CBS. So Miner is doing all these technical developments, trying to experiment to see how theater would work on television, so that Studio One becomes the outgrowth of all his experiments. And it was that series where CBS would try to create a dramatic experience for the home viewer.
Well, I just think he's guilty. I thought it was obvious.
And it's really 1948 when television is able to find sponsorship, especially for dramatic series, that it really takes off and people begin to become regular viewers of television. And the growth of television in the 50s is amazing. In the beginning of the decade, 9% of the populace has television. By the end of the decade, 90%. So you can see that there's a tremendous increase of people buying sets. And one of the main reasons for people buying sets was this development of live drama. Everyone talked about it.
Talk, talk, talk. You ever hear so much talk about nothing? Well, I guess they're entitled.
There are a series of great scripts that sort of changed the course of live drama. Certainly in 1953, Marty does that. 54 belongs to Reginald Rose, and that's his script for 12 Angry Men and other dramas he did in 54. 55 then is Rod Serling, and he does this script called Patterns, which deals with the business ethos in America. And those three scripts, Marty, 12 Angry Men, Patterns, changed the entire dynamic of live television.
If we're going to discuss the case, let's discuss the facts.
There are many things happening in American television in the early 50s. The most dominant show is I Love Lucy, that airs on Monday night on CBS. It's also interesting that Studio One also airs on Monday night. I Love Lucy at 9 o'clock, Studio One at 10 o'clock. So that there is this natural flow in a way that people that would watch an I Love Lucy program then later would watch Studio One. So Studio One did very well because it was on probably CBS's most successful night.
All right, now you gentlemen can work this any way you want to. By that I mean I'm not going to give you any rules.
Well,
you can discuss it.
Let's vote now. Who knows? Maybe we can all go home.
Yeah, let's find out who's where.
Right after the war, there were a generation of young writers looking for a new medium. They knew something was happening to American culture. They had seen so many different things happening. They wanted to use live television to express what was the current state of the American soul. And Reginald Rose was part of this group. It's funny, they're all connected in many ways. They all had served in the military in some way. Reggie Rose served for 4 years. And they're all doing sort of odd jobs that they're not satisfied with. Rose is working in an advertising agency. But when he sees television, he sees a whole new format, a whole new way of writing that really he could adapt his writing skills to. And you can certainly include the major writers, Chayefsky, Rose, and Serling, all come from the same generation, all born in the early 20s, and they all sort of gravitate to television in the early 50s. They see that as a medium for them to express themselves.
I have always thought that a man was entitled to have unpopular opinions in this country. This is the reason I came here. In my own country, I'm ashamed.
Look, what are we supposed to do now? Listen to the whole history of your country?
Reginald Rose's experience in serving in a jury in early 1954 changed his whole thought process, and maybe it changed his writing as well. He served on the jury. He had never been in a courtroom, he'd never been in a jury room, and the experience of being with a group of men and hearing them debate this one case really changed Reginald Rose's philosophy of life and then obviously of his art.
This is a remarkable thing about democracy, that we are, what's the word, notified. That we are notified by mail to come down to this place and decide about the guilt or innocence of a man we have not known before.
The case dealt with a homeless person who stabs a man on the street, provoked a great debate in the jury room as to what type of offense it was. And it could range from manslaughter to assault. And those 8 hours of debating what this offense was really sparked an interest in Rose and the whole legal process.
We can be here all night. It's only one night. A man may die because of us.
The one thing about Reginald Rose and his jury experience was it was happening in 1954, and that's when Joseph McCarthy was at his apex. In fact, the McCarthy hearings would be held a few months later after Rose is in this jury room. So Rose is thinking about not only his own personal experience in the courtroom, but he's also thinking about what the court means to the American culture. And he begins to ruminate on the whole process of how opinions are formed in the United States. And his portrait in 12 Angry Men is not only of a man trying to determine the guilt or innocence of one individual, but he's also thinking about what is opinion, how is opinion formed? Is it formed by a mob that just wants to get things done, or is it formed by one man who thinks about things and wants to reflect and do the right thing?
It's 11 for guilty. Those voting not guilty. 1. Okay?
The thing about 12 Angry Men and many of the individual dramas seen on live television is that they were seen as a unique experience. They were seen for one night and one night only. Television drama was very disposable at that time. And it's funny, in 1954, there was no thought that 12 Angry Men would be seen again. They didn't try to restage it. The whole idea of restaging happens the year later with Rod Serling's Patterns.
Gentleman chose not to stand alone against us. Well, that's his right. He left the responsibility entirely up to us. He gambled for support, and I gave it to him.
12 Angry Men was immediately seized by the critics, and you could tell in the voting of the Emmy Awards that it was 12 Angry Men that really pushed the Academy to create categories for individual dramas. And in fact, in the Emmy Awards, 12 Angry Men sweeps the Emmys and wins for Best Program of the Year, Best Writer, and Best Actor, Robert Cummings.
You want this boy to die because you personally want it, not because of the facts. You're a sadist. Shut up! You don't actually mean that you'll kill me, do you?
When you look at 12 Angry Men now, a lot of the actors probably won't be familiar, but they were certainly familiar for audiences in the early 50s. Two actors who have been in film and in theater, juror number 3, Franchette Tone, who's on a lot of live television, and then a very distinguished actor, Walter Abel, who's juror number 4. These are veteran character actors that the audiences know and probably tuned in to see. But also on the 12 Angry Men jury are some younger actors who people pretty much don't know. And one is Norman Feld, as he's known in the credits. He becomes Norman Fell after a whole series of character parts in the 60s and 70s until he becomes the landlord in Three's Company. And his character, Mr. Roper, becomes part of American culture.
I vote guilty. Number 2? Not guilty.
Robert Cummings had been certainly known to movie audiences since the 40s. He appeared in a very well-known Hitchcock film, Saboteur. And he was also going to be in Dial M for Murder, too, in 1954. So Cummings is an actor who can play both comedy and drama. He's not a really serious actor. You don't see him with gravitas. But he's an actor who sort of can specialize in all different types of emotions. He's a lighter actor, and I think that's one of the great surprises when you see him in 12 Angry Men. He really was an everyman. He was not someone who had the conscience that would sort of grapple with issues. But you can see this every guy who then becomes part of a jury system and has his own opinion.
Let me ask you something. How come you believe her? She's just one of them, too, isn't she?
You're a pretty smart young fellow.
Franklin Schaffner, who directed 12 Angry Men, was one of the great directors in live television. He could direct almost any genre. He directed political convention, he directed sporting events from baseball to football, and he also did live drama. So he really had a sense of history and spectacle, and that's what he was known for. Franklin Schaffner really understood the mechanics of moving actors through space. He saw that in history. He could adapt that vision to television.
Stop. What's the time?
Just a second. So it's 20, exactly 28 seconds.
28 seconds. Listen, it's my guess that the old man was trying to get to the front door. He heard someone rushing down the stairs, and he assumed that it was the boy.
Generally, they had several weeks rehearsal, but then once the show went on, for 12 Angry Men, 10 o'clock on a Monday night, it was as if you were seeing theater, but with the mechanics of cutting in film, going from close-up to long shot. It was a tremendous exercise in how to translate drama to an audience and have this connection between audience and seeing something that was happening before their eyes live.
Take a look at that knife. That's a very strange knife. Aren't you trying to make us accept a pretty incredible piece of coincidence?
The feature film of 12 Angry Men took 21 days to shoot. There were, I think, 365 shots in that film. The television version of 12 Angry Men took 1 hour to produce. It was done live, and Schaffner had thought out all of the blocking, all of the staging, and did it live that evening. It's interesting, in 1962, Franklin Schaffner directs the tour of the White House with Jacqueline Kennedy. He wins a Peabody Award. He wins an Emmy Award for that. But it's very much, in a way, like 12 Angry Men. He is directing Mrs. Kennedy through the White House, and he really has a great sense of people and space. And I think that's one of the great attributes of Franklin Schaffner, understanding historical events and really giving a drama to them.
Why do you vote not guilty?
Because I don't think he's guilty.
I want another vote now.
Franklin Schaffner does a lot of television for 14 years or so. He's working with CBS in all different genres. But then he becomes a very successful director of feature films, like other directors of live television, John Frankenheimer, Delbert Mann, Robert Mulligan. Schaffner goes into film and sort of brings his vision of the spectacle to feature film. His great film is Patton, which wins an Academy Award for Schaffner for directing that great, legendary American hero.
Well, does anybody still say that there's not at least a reasonable doubt? No.
The television version of 12 Angry Men is so succinct that although most of the jury members are types, you really get a sense of how opinions are formed. And in 52 minutes, it really has a dramatic sweep that is so unusual in live television. You see 12 men in a room and just the changing landscape of how opinions are formed. And at the very end, it's also very ambiguous. You're not quite sure what decision this jury has made. When you see juror number 8, Robert Cummings, talking to juror number 3, Franchot Tone, you're not quite sure if he's going to go with the group or be the lone wolf and decide that this will be a mistrial. And I think that's one of the great things about the television version of 12 Angry Men. It's this ambiguity that you're not sure after spending an hour with this group of men how everything is concluded. That is very different in television. For the most part, television wraps everything up in an hour. Reginald Rose has a very complex mind and could not wrap things up. And the one thing I like about 12 Angry Men, the television version, is then you go back to the judge's instructions to the jury. You don't see anyone in the jury trial, but you hear those instructions again. And it makes you think, how would I decide this case? And I think that's what Rose wanted. You saw these 12 men. Now he's throwing it back to the audience. You make your decision.
Murder in the first degree, premeditated homicide, is the most serious charge tried in our criminal courts. You've heard a long and complex case, gentlemen, and it is now your duty to sit down to try and separate the facts from the fancy. One man is dead. The life of another is in your hands.